The Veil Theron lay broken, a colossal beast of biomechanical brilliance, sprawled across the scorched plains of Zentofor. It had once ruled the skies with wings spun from crystallized nebulae, and a hull grown from starbone, pulsing with an intelligence older than most species. Now it twitched in agony, its wings shattered, the neural lattice frayed beyond comprehension. The Zalari, a race who prided themselves as architects of living vessels, stood helpless before their own creation. Their best engineers, minds sharpened over centuries of post-singularity evolution, had failed. Every attempt to interact with the ship triggered a defensive rejection, a bioelectric scream that seared circuits and blistered flesh. It wasn't a simple machine. It was aware, afraid, and slowly dying. The ship wasn't just transport. It was sacred. A symbol of Zalari superiority, an heirloom of power and grace. To lose it was unthinkable. Yet here it was, grounded and fading, while those who birthed it could only watch. Their reverence had become their barrier. They could no longer touch what they had deified. In desperation, the Dominion Council broadcast a challenge: any species, any skill set. Come forward. Fix what the galaxy's finest could not. A reward was offered, but for most, it was about the prestige. Hundreds arrived, from Glarnan neurosplicers to machine-chanting cultists of the Harkin fold. None succeeded. The ship rejected them all. It wanted more than logic. It wanted to be understood. Near the edge of the clearing, a figure watched quietly, leaning on a dented metal case. No glowing implants. No cybernetic crown. Just a man in grease-stained coveralls and calloused hands. Cole Weaver, a mechanic from the Martian outer dockyards, known for salvaging derelicts the Unions had written off as scrap. He'd seen the announcement on a rusting relay station while fixing a leaking coolant line. Something about the image of the broken dragon ship had tugged at him. He didn't come for glory. He came because something felt familiar. The crowd shifted as he approached. He was out of place, too simple, too human. His toolbox clanked with physical tools, not nanite swarms. His gait was unhurried, his eyes scanning the wounded ship like a farmer approaching a frightened animal. No one stopped him. They were too busy laughing or dismissing him with sneers. He didn't care. He'd seen that look before, the look machines gave when people forgot they were more than bolts and code. This one was alive. And it was terrified. Cole didn't speak to the crowd. He didn't need to. He stepped close, crouched, and placed a hand on the cooling hull. The ship quivered. Not violently, just a ripple, like an exhausted creature recognizing a gentler presence. He whispered something, not in code, not in alien dialects, just soft words like one might murmur to a panicked animal. He wasn't trying to assert dominance, or hack its systems. He was simply acknowledging its pain. He opened the toolbox and pulled out a simple scanner, then pushed it aside. Useless. The readings were static. Instead, he listened. To the hum beneath the surface, the pauses between pulses. There was rhythm, but it was wrong. Uneven. Like a heart stuttering. Beneath a panel of fused plating, he found a rupture, not mechanical but organic. Like a broken rib. He paused, brushed dust away, and examined the fibrous tissue linking the plating to the wing's base. Frayed, half-dead, twitching? He didn't cut. He touched, tested tension, checked response. Slowly, carefully, he began trimming the dead fibers with a precision cutter and feeding in a bypass made from recycled Martian alloy, soft, pliable, but strong under pressure. Not elegant. But it held. A faint shiver passed through the ship. Not rejection. Not pain. Just awareness. The crowd noticed. Whispers spread. The ship had moved. Cole didn't look up. He was already studying the next segment, mapping it not like a circuit board, but like a damaged spine. He'd fixed hundreds of hulls, reworked plasma feeds on ships older than most stations. But this wasn't about the parts. It was about intent. Every fix had to say, asterisk. I see you. Asterisk. He wasn't fast. He wasn't flashy. But piece by piece, he began to stop the bleeding, not in sparks and code, but in subtle shifts. The ship's wing, once limp and cracked, gave the faintest twitch. Enough to silence the crowd. Enough to make even the Zalari elder lean forward. No announcements. No declarations. Just one human, a toolbox, and a broken being in need of care. Cole stood slowly, wiping grime from his fingers. The ship vibrated again, barely audible, like a purr under mountains of pain. Not healed. Not yet. But responding. And for the first time since it fell, the Veil Theron didn't flinch from touch. It had been seen. And that was the first step to being whole again. Cole didn't ask for permission. He simply returned the next day, toolbox in hand, moving through the skeptical crowd like a ghost. The Zalari didn't stop him, confused by the ship's slight but undeniable improvement. Their brightest minds had failed, and now this human, lacking degrees or implants, was being watched with silent tension. Cole barely noticed. His focus was entirely on the ship. He approached like he had before, touching the surface as if greeting an old friend. The Veil Theron shivered again, its reaction unmistakable. He had no grand plan, only instinct and experience. His fingers moved across panels with the certainty of someone who'd learned through trial and failure. Not theory, but grit. Years working inside derelicts and low-gravity salvage bays, fingers numb from coolant leaks, breathing in toxic fumes while patching hulls with little more than tape and patience. He'd worked jobs where diagnostics were obsolete and instincts kept people alive. That's what guided him now. The ship pulsed irregularly beneath his hand, its energy patterns chaotic, disrupted. Every alien engineer had tried to impose order through control systems, data overlays, or injected algorithms. But Cole didn't force anything. He observed. And he adapted. He found a cluster of organic filaments that reminded him of nerve bundles he'd once seen in an abandoned Jovian war cruiser, a ship that had fused with a proto-sentient AI. That time, he hadn't tried to override the system. He'd let it lead. This was no different. Cole opened a panel, revealing soft inner tissue, vascular and electrical, intertwined in a way no blueprint could explain. Instead of tools, he used touch, checking for response, gauging resistance, identifying living feedback. The alien engineers had treated the Veil Theron as a corrupted system. Cole saw it as a wounded creature. That made all the difference. He pulled spare parts from his toolbox, none of which were made for this ship. A flexible Martian conduit, a salvaged plasma weave, a fragment from a burned-out Terran cargo drive. To the watching aliens, it looked like chaos. But every piece had been chosen for resilience. He didn't look for elegance, he looked for survival. And the ship understood. It accepted his changes with subtle shifts in its biocurrent, slowly stabilizing. His movements were quiet, deliberate. There was no wasted action. Where others sought perfection, Cole sought trust. He didn't speak to anyone. But he did speak softly to the Veil Theron, not with words meant for machines, but with the tone one used to reassure. The ship listened. He located a shattered conduit near the base of the primary wing structure, internally sealed by layers of dense biotissue. Others had tried to pierce it with force. Cole found a natural fold and worked slowly, folding back the membrane without tearing it. Inside, he found corrosion, infection, decay. But he didn't panic. He'd seen this before. It wasn't systemic. It was grief locked in tissue. The ship had been in mourning for itself. Cole cleaned the damage carefully, using solvents and tools that seemed primitive to alien eyes. But he didn't rush. Every cleaned connection responded, sending back tiny pulses. The ship wasn't just stabilizing, it was starting to communicate. Not in words or direct code, but through sensation, resonance. A kind of emotional feedback. Cole understood it intuitively. His whole life, machines had always spoken to him that way. Through hums, resistance, temperature changes. It was how he read the world. By the 5th hour, a distinct rhythm returned to the ship's pulse. The core stabilized, its feedback loops no longer erratic. The crystalline wings remained grounded, but energy was moving again, slow and cautious, like circulation restarting in a numbed limb. The change wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, but unmistakable. No one approached Cole. No one interrupted. They couldn't. What he was doing was outside their understanding. Not because it was complex, but because it was unorthodox. He didn't dominate the ship's systems. He cooperated. And the ship was responding like a creature that had known only pain and was now beginning to trust. He didn't smile. He didn't look for acknowledgement. When he was done for the day, he packed up his tools and nodded to the ship. It pulsed once in return, like a heartbeat echo. The alien spectators remained silent, unsure what they'd just witnessed. But they knew something had changed. Cole left without a word, his hands still stained with a mixture of grease, blood like organic fluid, and glowing traces of whatever energy the Veil Theron ran on. He didn't need recognition. The ship had accepted his presence. That was enough. The next morning, Cole returned to find the ship subtly changed. The wing plating had shifted, just slightly, in his absence, as if adjusting itself. Not for function but comfort. The kind of unconscious movement made by something learning to breathe again. He approached with quiet purpose, scanned the area he'd worked on, and noted how the replaced fibers had fused. The Martian alloy had not been rejected. Instead, it had been drawn inward, absorbed like grafted tissue. He knelt, opened a second panel farther down the spinal ridge, and froze. The inner structure was laced with patterns that weren't just functional, they were expressive. Flowing, spiral engravings lined the neural sheath, etched in a recursive fractal style. It wasn't decorative. It pulsed with memory. He recognized the rhythm in the shapes, like forgotten calligraphy echoing something ancient and half-remembered. Then he saw the unmistakable outline of a winged creature, not an alien dragon, but distinctly Terran. Scaled, long-necked and horned. A myth. His myth. He traced the engraving gently, stunned. The Zalari hadn't created this ship from pure logic. They had drawn on something older, a shadow from Earth's mythos. Somehow, the design was influenced by human stories. Dragons? Fire breathers of Earth's medieval past. No engineer would have spotted it. It wasn't in the ship's code or frame. It was embedded in the very nervous tissue, stylized like a memory passed down genetically. That changed everything. He understood now why the others had failed. They tried to approach the ship as a technological marvel, a living circuit to be reactivated. But it wasn't just a machine or creature, it was a memory vessel. A fusion of biology and symbolic intelligence. It couldn't be healed with precision alone. It had to be understood through meaning. He reached for a pouch of salvaged components, micro-threaded copper veins from a derelict scout drone, a strip of reflective shielding with irregular wave conductance, and a shard of old Earth steel engraved with a forged mark from one of the first orbital drydocs. Worthless by market standards, but each piece held a story. He inserted them not for their utility, but for resonance. The neural mesh responded. The pulse of the ship slowed, steadied. It was accepting the offering, not just as material, but as memory. He worked deeper into the hull, finding damage where the internal energy matrix had fragmented. The surrounding tissue was scorched and brittle. He could have bypassed it with synthetic grafts, but he didn't. He retrieved a filament grown from an old Venusian mining rig, flexible, tough, used in high-pressure atmospheric drills. He bound it with Martian ceramic glue and Terran carbon mesh, forming a hybrid patch that mimicked tendon and wire. As he inserted it, the ship rippled with silent tension, then stilled. It hadn't been patched like that before. It liked it. The aliens watching didn't understand what they were seeing. Cole wasn't restoring the ship. He was reintroducing it to its own origins. Every piece he added wasn't just structurally sound, it carried symbolic weight. The ship, built on a dream, was being reminded of that dream. Hours passed. He found a damaged junction node with a collapsed data cluster. It had once translated navigation instructions into neural impulse. Now it sputtered nonsense. Instead of replacing it, he embedded a resonance chip tuned to archaic Earth music, low-frequency jazz notes encoded into harmonic bursts. The ship's surrounding tissues shifted toward the sound. Not for comprehension but comfort. It was responding to tone, not instruction. Cole adjusted the frequency, and the ship emitted a low, matching hum. Feedback became harmony. No one had ever treated the Veil Theron this way. Every previous attempt had been rooted in domination, precision, or aggressive logic. Cole offered memory, tone, story, and adaptation. It wasn't repair, it was recognition. He didn't see the ship as a puzzle. He saw it as a wounded storyteller. By nightfall, the secondary wing flexed slightly. Not flight-ready, but no longer inert. Energy laced through the crystalline structure in branching pulses. Each spark followed a path he had restored, not mechanically optimal, but emotionally resonant. The ship wasn't just repairing itself. It was remembering how to fly. Cole stood back, sweat-drenched and exhausted. He didn't need to test the systems. He could feel the change. The Veil Theron had accepted the story he was telling through every graft and splice. And that story was not of superiority or logic. It was of survival, imagination, and trust. Cole knew the wings were the heart of the ship's identity, not just propulsion, but expression, balance, and memory. They were living extensions, shaped not for speed alone but for grace, like the outstretched limbs of a dancer mid-flight. The left wing, still dormant, was structurally intact yet motionless. The right, fractured and partially fused, pulsed erratically, signaling pain the ship couldn't articulate. Every attempt others had made to mend them had failed because they treated the wings like appendages, not language. Cole saw them for what they were, the voice of the ship. He began by isolating the fault lines, hairline fractures in the neural joints where crystal met sinew. The lines pulsed faintly with residual energy, but something deeper was wrong. The pulses were misaligned, out of sync, sending contradictory signals. It was more than injury, it was confusion. The ship no longer trusted its own body. He moved along the span, identifying points where the neural threads had collapsed under stress, where input signals looped endlessly without reaching command nodes. The wings hadn't just broken, they'd lost their rhythm. He opened the core access junction beneath the right wing and exposed a fractured pulse driver node. Instead of replacing it, he recalibrated its interfaces using manual tools, tuning it by ear like an old musician restoring a warping instrument. Every adjustment he made was based on tactile memory. The surface temperature. The resistance in the filaments. The ship didn't need perfection, it needed certainty. Something it could rely on. When he reconnected the pulse driver to the core, the entire ship jolted. Not violently, just a sudden awareness, like a breath drawn after drowning. The broken wing flinched. A small movement, raw and instinctive. Cole responded immediately, grounding the excess current through a copper brace and stabilizing the feedback. The wing didn't withdraw. It steadied. For the first time since the crash, the ship wasn't fighting its own form. He moved to the left wing, less damaged but disconnected. The junction points had sealed themselves in a defensive shutdown. Cole didn't force them open. Instead, he introduced a low electrical rhythm, an old earth pulse sequence used in ancient cardiac therapy. He amplified it through the adjacent conduits and waited. The tissue responded, unfolding like petals sensing light. Slowly, delicately, the connections re-exposed themselves. He rejoined them using a lattice of carbon fiber nerves woven by hand, anchoring them with traces of memory-coded alloys, each bonded to signals he'd calibrated by feel alone. The ship's response was subtle but unmistakable. Energy flowed from core to wings in a smooth, continuous loop. Not full strength, but balanced. The wings flexed, once, then twice, and then more steadily. Light pulsed through their crystalline structure, casting shifting spectrums across the dust-choked air. The ship wasn't just moving. It was remembering the motion. Each shift was more precise, more confident. Cole reinforced the joints with overlapping mesh segments designed for movement under organic strain, salvaged from hybrid Earth-Terran Walker tech. These weren't designed for elegance, but resilience. Every adjustment acknowledged the ship's biology and need for agency. He wasn't reprogramming it, he was giving it permission to move. The alien onlookers stood silent, eyes locked on the wings as they began to arch outward. No one spoke. The previous engineers had tried to dominate the wing's motion, force stability. Cole simply restored the channels, cleared interference, and offered the ship the chance to remember itself. And it did. The wings extended fully, shimmering with inner fire, then folded back in sequence. Not just motion, but choreography. The ship was testing itself, slowly, precisely. No stutter. No misalignment. For the first time since the fall, it moved without hesitation. Cole stood at the base, his hands stained with organic fluid and metal dust, watching with the calm of someone who had finished a conversation. The ship's core gave a low, resonant hum, a deep, sonorous sound that vibrated through the ground. It was not a signal of completion. It was acknowledgement. Gratitude, not programmed, not translated, but shared directly. The Zalari elders, long silent, stepped forward with disbelief etched across their refined features. None of their calculations had worked. None of their theories held up. But the wings were whole again, and their ship, pride of their fleet, was alive. Not because of advanced logic, but because one human had looked at it, not as a relic, but as something that deserved to be heard. The ship had flown once because it was built to. Now, it would fly again because it chose to. When the Veiltherin rose from the ground, it did so in silence. No propulsion roar, no display of dominance, just a graceful ascent, the wings unfolding with measured control. Light refracted off the crystalline span, casting layered shadows over the stunned crowd. Its motion was deliberate, unhurried, like it was savoring every fraction of elevation. What had once been a monument to failure now soared with precision, an entity renewed not by engineering, but through understanding. Every joint that had resisted motion now cooperated fluidly, as if time itself had reversed within its structure. At the edge of the launch platform, Cole remained motionless, hands resting at his sides, eyes tracing the flight path. The ship passed overhead once, banking low, wings extended in a controlled arc. It was unmistakably a gesture, acknowledgement from the very being that only days ago had been slipping toward death. The ship had no need for words. Its return to flight was message enough. After a slow loop above the horizon, the Veiltherin ignited its inner core with a deep, golden glow and vanished into the upper atmosphere. Its departure left no scorch marks, only the soft echo of harmonic resonance across the stillness. No one moved for long moments. Even the Zalari, bound by custom and precision, offered no speech. The ship had spoken, and the meaning was undeniable. A scale lay at Cole's feet, translucent, still warm, humming faintly with residual memory. He bent, picked it up, and ran his thumb across the smooth surface. It vibrated in response, a quiet frequency only he seemed to hear. A parting gift, not of technology, but trust. The ship had chosen to leave behind something personal, a trace of itself embedded with gratitude. He tucked the scale into his coat pocket without ceremony. The rewards promised for repairing the Veiltherin were substantial: galactic credits, diplomatic immunity, access to Zalari archives. He refused nearly all. When pressed, he requested only spare materials for his salvage station and quiet departure clearance. Fame never interested him. His work had never been about legacy. It had always been about fixing what others gave up on. Within a week, he disappeared from all major channels. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some claimed the ship had returned for him, that it had become his companion vessel, bonded permanently. Others insisted he'd gone deep into the fringe zones, taking on jobs repairing forgotten cargo haulers with nothing but a soldering torch and that battered toolbox. No one could confirm either story. He simply vanished, leaving behind only the results of what he'd done. The Zalari, once dismissive of human potential, changed quietly but profoundly. They began incorporating intuition-based repair methods into their training. Storytellers were invited to engineering academies. Empathy algorithms were studied alongside structural formulas. They even formed an interdisciplinary branch called the Weaver Initiative, named unofficially after the man who taught them how to listen before they acted. It became a doctrine passed to generations, that not all answers came from precision, some from presence. On Earth, A small statue appeared at the edge of a Martian scrapyard. It wasn't ornate. Just a fusion of spare parts welded into the shape of a crouching mechanic, hand pressed to a wing fragment. At the base, a plaque bore a single phrase: "Machines remember who treats them kindly." No name. No date. Just the echo of a moment too significant for embellishment. Years later, across the galaxy, children of every species repeated a version of the story. It changed in the telling. Some said he whispered in forgotten languages, others swore he repaired the ship with music instead of tools. But all stories ended the same way. A human nobody watched a dying ship lift again, not because he rebuilt it, but because he reminded it what it meant to fly. There were no parades. No grand memorials. Just the memory of one man, a set of hands stained with grease, and a dragon-winged ship that chose to live. What Cole left behind wasn't just a repaired vessel. It was a shift in thinking, a quiet revolution in how beings viewed their creations. Somewhere out there, beneath the starlight, a human still wandered from wreck to wreck, toolbox in hand, fixing not just machines, but belief.